Hey everyone, and welcome back to From Pain Point to On Point, the show where we break down the challenges and strategies of leading high-performing sales teams. Today, we're going to be talking about a core driver of sales growth, how to build sales teams that aren't just high-performing, but also self-sufficient, accountable, and motivated to their own goals. And I know that sounds like a bunch of LinkedIn word soup, but I promise it's not just buzzwords. More than ever, accountability on sales teams is becoming increasingly more important. It's the backbone of a successful and self-sufficient sales team. And as always on this podcast, we are not going to hawk SalesScreen to you. I'm SalesScreen's #1 fan, but you don't need any fancy software to make this happen. We absolutely make the process easier, but the mindset shift itself is something any manager can start fostering today. So let's talk about why autonomy and accountability are so critical, how you can build these into your culture right now, and why this approach might be the most powerful lever that you can pull as a manager. So let's get into it. First, let's talk about why autonomy matters. Autonomy is not just a nice to have in sales, it is a fundamental driver of performance. And decades of research back this up. One of the most widely accepted frameworks is the self-determination theory. And this is something that we talk about at SalesScreen all of the time. It is a theory that we use to help guide our development of products and features in our platform. And it was developed originally by psychologists Edward Deci and Richard Ryan in 1985. And then they expanded to a full paper in the year 2000 called Self-Determination Theory and the Facilitation of Intrinsic Motivation, Social Development, and Well-Being. Self-determination theory suggests that people are most motivated and perform their best when three psychological needs are met: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. So, in layman's terms, that means we thrive when we have control over our actions, we feel capable in our work, and experience meaningful connection to others. Autonomy within this theory is more than just having flexibility in your calendar. It's about feeling ownership over your work, that you are the one driving your goals forward. In sales, this is so powerful. When reps feel like they have agency, they're more engaged, they're more invested in their outcomes, and they're more willing to take creative risks that lead to breakthroughs. And if you're looking to improve sales, autonomy gives reps the space to experiment, to iterate, and find out what works best for their selling style and also for their territory and markets. So, if you're listening to this podcast, then you have definitely heard the name Daniel Pink. Daniel Pink is a best-selling author. He's one of the most influential thinkers on business, sales, work, human behavior today. He's authored multiple New York Times bestsellers, including Drive, To Sell is Human, and The Power of Regret. And then also, as a fun fact, which I didn't know, maybe I should have known this. Maybe this is like really well-known information and I just like didn't know it. But he was also the speechwriter for Vice President Al Gore. Who knew? Too bad he could not give his speeches for him. Daniel Pink talks about the self-determination theory in his book Drive, and obviously he didn't create it, but he has really helped kind of bring that theory and that thought process into the mainstream. And he really dives into the concepts that were brought forth by Deci and Ryan. And he talks a lot about autonomy and how autonomy is really the desire to be able to direct our own lives. Mastery, which is being able to really master whatever it is that you're working on and what you're doing so that you feel competent doing it, and then purpose, wanting to do work that is meaningful. And that doesn't always mean like the work that you're doing is directly impacting poverty or anything like that, but just like the work that you're doing is valuable to you and it doesn't feel arbitrary and it doesn't feel like somebody just threw something at you to do for busy work, but that the work that you're doing is having a real business impact and is important to the success of the business. So Pink's work popularized the idea that traditional carrot and stick motivation, like commissions, bonuses, quotas, the real Glengarry Glen Ross style of selling is less effective. It's just not as effective for long-term performance than is creating an environment where people feel autonomous and where they feel challenged and where they feel connected to the larger mission. And so, in sales terms, if we were to break down so simply, it is not just about the comp plan. And I think that is, especially as we talk about culture and what it means to develop an autonomous and accountable culture, it's so important to understand that money is great. We love money. It makes our lives a lot easier. But I think that everybody can resonate with the idea or with the experience, rather, of staying at a job, even though the money isn't that great, or even the working conditions aren't that great, but you have a really fantastic relationship to your team, or you have a boss that you really love, or you really like your job is making an impact on the business, or it's doing something important. And so that's giving you that sense of mastery or a sense of purpose. And I think that's pretty universal. We've all kind of had that experience. So we all have an understanding that autonomy and mastery and purpose are really key tenets to feeling good and feeling successful and wanting to show up to your job every day and do the job to the best of your ability. And the money on top of it is great. Like I said, nobody's turning down a raise, but we just know that that is not the end all be all, even in a career path like sales, where it can oftentimes be considered the be all end all. So, why is autonomy so important in sales? Why is it such a big deal? What we know is that sales reps are making decisions every single day: how to prioritize leads, when to push for a close, how to tailor messaging to a specific buyer. And when reps feel micromanaged, they default into compliance instead of creativity. And that is such a miss on a manager's part. Obviously, and this is maybe a little biased because I'm coming from the marketing side of things. So we love when our sales teams are compliant. We love when they stick to the script. We love when they don't mess with our decks. We do like when they are a little bit compliant. We certainly don't want them selling products and features that we don't have, but we also want them to be really creative. And this is an example that I've brought up in previous podcasts, but we used to have a seller that was at SalesScreen, and we had a very strict budget for our sales team at the time. And we also had a very calculated way of reaching out and prospecting. And this seller decided he was not going to do that and he was not going to follow these rules, much to the chagrin of everybody else. He broke out and he did his own thing, and he ended up sending these paper napkin notes to a bunch of prospects. And it was really great. It caught the eyes of basically all of the prospects that he reached out to, and he ended up getting a couple of meetings from that. So it was very successful. His non-compliance to some of the things that we had set up was actually incredibly beneficial because he decided that he was just going to focus on his creativity because he felt like he had the autonomy to be able to do that. And obviously, we were going to hold him accountable if it didn't work. So thankfully, it did work. But ultimately, what I'm trying to say is that when they're trusted to own their process, they can become so much more adaptable and more strategic and proactive and creative in the way that they are reaching out to prospects and the way that they are dealing with prospects throughout the deal cycle. And so, what does that ultimately mean? It means that you are able to get real business impact from that creativity and from that autonomy. The proof of this is actually in the pudding. We have a study that was published in the Harvard Business Review and found that companies that gives their employees more autonomy see a 30% improvement in performance, which is pretty massive. They also saw a reduction in turnover, and they also saw higher levels of innovation, engagement, and resilience. And the reason why is really because when people feel trusted, they really do rise to the occasion. They take ownership of their outcomes and they experiment to find out what's going to work best in their market. And that means that they're more committed to achieving their success. And that's not because they're told to, it's because they want to. And that's the unlock, because they want to. So let's talk about sales accountability, because obviously it's a two-prong approach. And this isn't about top-down pressure. That doesn't work very well. This is about clarity. Reps should know exactly what success looks like, and they should be able to track their sales numbers in real time. So one way to boost accountability is to use metrics that reps themselves set. That way, they're not just doing work, but they're actually owning their results. And the important thing about accountability and fostering accountability is that the autonomy aspect of this is vital. Autonomy without accountability is a recipe for freaking chaos. You do not want to just set your reps free and hope for the best. You want them to take responsibility for the results and not just for their effort. And this is where a lot of managers struggle. How do you balance giving your reps freedom while still holding them to these high standards? And the answer to that, one of the answers to that is transparency. By making goals and progress, that's a big one, visible, not just to the manager, but to the rep themselves. A study by the American Psychological Association found that employees are 50% more productive when they clearly understand their goals and have regular visibility into their progress. So, this is really about creating a system where reps can see their progress in real time, they can recognize their wins, but more importantly, they can see and they feel empowered to course correct without a manager constantly looking over their shoulder. Another approach to this, and this feels like a throwaway, but it's still worth mentioning. It's still worth talking about because it is so important. But another approach to this is to set up regular check ins that focus on progress and not just outcomes. So instead of asking what's happened with this deal, ask what's standing in your way or how can we adjust the approach. And that shifts the conversation from blame, you haven't done enough in this amount of time or whatever the case is, to problem solving, right? So we're going from blame to problem solving. It reinforces the accountability aspect of this without creating a lot of unnecessary pressure on the rep because they already feel it. Don't worry. And the really nice thing for managers by approaching this way, which I will concede can be difficult at times, especially if you don't have a tool like SalesScreen, or if you don't have a tool that is able to surface performance data very well or very clearly, is that you often are stuck having one, you don't have a lot of time. So there's not a lot of time to like deep dive into an individual's performance, especially not if you have a big team. So you're like stuck doing a lot of admin work and that takes up a lot of your time. And if you have a big team, it's really time consuming to have to go in and constantly monitor performance. And so it does get a little bit easier to just have status check-ins. But the nice thing about this approach is that managers then get to become trusted advisors, right? Like you get to be the thing that you're supposed to be. Like you step away from the project manager role and you actually become a real resource that can share the information that you have, the strategies that you've used, best practices. You can really become somebody that helps your sales team and helps your reps and encourages them and supports them in a way that allows them to move forward positively rather than just becoming the status update person, which especially we talk to sales managers all the time and very often that's what these one-on-ones can turn into. I think it's fairly common for sales managers to have one-on-ones with their teams, but the content of those one-on-ones is oftentimes where are we at with X, Y, and Z? And by being able to instill and foster a culture of autonomy and accountability on the team, and also being able to visualize their progress, you are not so focused on the status updates. It's more about how can we actually get you to goal, which is honestly, I think, what most managers want to be doing anyway. So it's a win-win. Speaking about wins, oh my gosh, what a great segue. I didn't even mean for that to happen. Let's talk about the power of small wins and why they matter so much in a high performance culture. So, research. Again, I'm just throwing research at you left and freaking right. Research from the Harvard Business School on the progress principle shows that even incremental progress on meaningful work can spark a powerful boost in motivation. When people feel like they're making headway, even if it's small, even if it's a tiny step forward, they are more engaged, they are more resilient, and they are more likely to maintain consistent effort over time. And that is not fluff, that is measurable. Teams that track and celebrate daily progress outperform those that only focus on big milestones. Meaning, if you are only focusing on the deal won, and you are not focusing on all of the other stuff that went into getting that closed, you are missing out. You're limiting the success of your sales reps by doing that. Small wins reinforce momentum. They give people a sense of control, they give people a sense of competence, and those are two essential ingredients of motivation according to the self-determination theory, which we talked about earlier. So this is where autonomy and accountability intersect. When reps are given freedom to break down their targets into manageable personal milestones, they're more likely to buy into the process. And autonomy doesn't mean doing whatever you want. It means that you have the power and the trust to approach goals in the way that makes sense to your role, to your market, to your working style, even. And when that freedom is paired with visibility and ownership over progress, accountability stops feeling like this top-down pressure and it starts to become self-driven. So instead of holding your team to arbitrary checkpoints or micromanaging activity, give them a framework where they can charter their own course, track their own progress, and celebrate every step forward, because performance improves when people feel like they are in charge of their own success and not just following orders. This is about building a culture where accountability is owned, not enforced. And success is measured not just at the finish line, but in the daily effort it takes to get there. It's about shifting that mindset from I have to hit this quota to I want to crush this goal. So that was a lot. I threw a lot of research at you guys in this podcast. We don't normally do a ton of research backed. Well, I guess that's not true. We have a Bartle Players series, and that is all research back, but we had a lot of stats. We had a lot of statistics in this podcast today, and we're going to keep doing that for you guys too. I think it's important to be able to back up some of this stuff that we're talking about with the research that we use all of the time and with the real results. We know that having a great culture is super important, and we know that having a great culture is a revenue driver, helps with retention, and great culture really does stem from the bottom up autonomy and accountability that we were talking about today, right? Everybody wants to feel like they're making an impact, like they are creating meaningful connections with their customers, with their prospects, with their teammates. And everybody wants to feel like they can have ownership over how they approach their work. And I could literally talk about this for days, weeks, hours. For your sake, I'm not going to, and I'm going to end it here. But at the end of the day, the best way to improve sales, it's not just better tools, it's not new scripts, although those help. I'm not trying to deny that, especially SalesScreen. It's really about empowering your sales reps to take ownership over their outcomes while supporting them with smart sales metrics and a culture of real accountability. And that is how today's top sales teams are driving serious sales growth. So that's my final spiel here for you guys. Thank you so much for listening, for tuning in. I appreciate every listener that listens to this podcast. If you like what you heard, please subscribe. You can find this podcast anywhere that you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify. We're also on YouTube. If you're feeling really generous, you can leave me a little review. And until next time, keep pushing, keep selling, and remember that when reps can track their wins, own their progress, and shape their strategy, performance isn't a mandate, it's a mindset. All right. Until next time, thanks, guys.